is Stella Yi, and I have called Menzies home for 24 years. The first 2 years in Surrey Hills and 22 here in Doncaster. I'm a small business owner. What very few people know about me is that I can say that I have been an environment activist for as long as Bob Brown. I realized that I did not like people who abuse their power, who did not care how their actions affect others. I also didn't like the feeling of being powerless to change things. But importantly, I realized that I simply did not accept the injustice. I tried to do something about it. I'm telling this story because it's relevant today. I'm someone who believes in fairness, justice, and the power of people to make a difference. In 2019, I ran for federal parliament as the Labour candidate for Menzies, believing that change could come from within a major party. But over time, it became clear that both major parties are failing us. The two-party system is broken. They serve their donors, their party interests, and their own political survival, and not us, the people. That's why I'm running as an independent. Because I refuse to accept that politics is just about power. I believe it should be about people. We are living in a time of crisis. The cost of living is soaring. Home ownership is slipping further and further out of reach for young people, and actually older people as well. Infrastructure is years behind where it should be, and climate action is too slow and too weak. So in 2022, when Labour won, we all breathed a collective sigh of relief. But over time, we started to see a familiar pattern, the same preference for big business over everyday Australians. We saw it on climate action, when they approved more gas fields and coal mines. We saw it on gambling reform, where they backed down in the face of big money. And we saw it clearly when Senator Fatima Payman crossed the floor to vote in line with her party's platform to recognize the state of Palestine, only to be punished for showing moral courage. That's when I knew I could not stay in a party that demanded absolute allegiance over standing up for what is right. A big part of the problem in Australia is that our government never plans for long term. Because of the 3-year election cycle, both major parties are either trying to get into power or trying to hang on to power. That means no long-term planning, no vision for future generations, no real solutions to issues like housing affordability or infrastructure development. The government prioritizes policies that benefit short-term profits over long-term prosperity. If we continue down this path, we will be the first generation in modern history to leave our children worse off than ourselves. That is not progress. It is the betrayal of the Australian promise. Governments fail us because they don't plan for the long term. Let me give you several examples on housing and infrastructure. Singapore, a small island nation, 60 years old, it has nearly 6 million people. But what else has it got? 90% home ownership. Meanwhile, in Australia, we've been a country for double that time, 124 years. Only 66% of us own our own home. On infrastructure, we are falling behind, and nowhere is this clearer than in public transport. 24 years ago, when I left Malaysia, they had 2 train lines. The old KTM railway built by the British. Today, they have the MRT, the LRT, the monorail, the KTM, and the ERL. A modern, efficient system that connects cities, suburbs, and people in just 24 years. Meanwhile, right here in Menzies, let's talk about Doncaster Rail. First promised in 1890, actually there's a remarkable story about that. The first electric tram in the Southern Hemisphere was from Box Hill to Doncaster. It was left here when they came for the World Expo at the Royal Exhibition Centre. So, first promised in 1890, the land was bought, the land was sold, plans have been made, and then scrapped. 5 generations of Doncaster residents have waited in vain. Now we're being told to wait for the suburban rail loop, which might, if it even happens, give us a station in 2050. Maybe. We are being left behind. And it's not an accident. We are left behind because we are not a priority for the major parties. They only care about marginal seats, not safe ones, and Menzies have been a safe Liberal seat for decades. They only care about the survival, not our future. Another example of how governments of all stripes put big business ahead of ordinary Australians is the massive subsidies handed to the fossil fuel industries. In 2023-2024 financial year, federal and state governments allocated 14.5 billion in subsidies to fossil fuel producers and major users. That's a 31% increase from the year before, which was 11.1 billion. Over time, fossil fuel subsidies have cost 65 billion, lining the pockets of multinational corporations, while Australians struggle with rising energy costs and suffer through climate-related disasters. But here's the real kicker. Many of these companies pay little or no corporate tax. The Petroleum Resource Rent Tax, the PRRT, is so poorly designed that over half of all gas exports incur zero royalties. In fact, the government collects more revenue from student loan repayments, HECS, than from the PRRT. And who own all these massive fossil fuel companies? ExxonMobil, Chevron, Shell, BP, all foreign multinational corporations. The wealth generated with our resources doesn't stay in Australia. It goes offshore, while we are left to deal with the environmental and economic consequences. While we're on the topic of fossil fuels, have you heard of the Great Australian Gas Rip-Off? Australia is one of the largest gas exporters in the world. Yet despite exporting billions of dollars of gas, we are now experiencing gas shortage at home, driving up energy prices for Australian households and businesses. How did this happen, you ask? Because in the early 2000s, under the Howard government, Australia failed to introduce a domestic gas reservation policy, unlike countries like Qatar or even Western Australia, which ensure a portion of the gas production is reserved for local use at a reasonable price. As a result, we sell our gas overseas for a fraction of what Australians pay at home. Multinational companies profit while Australians struggle with soaring energy bills. And the government refuses to act because they prioritize the interests of fossil fuel industry over everyday Australians. Is this a good deal for us? Absolutely not. This is economic mismanagement at the highest level, and it is us who are paying the price. Contrast this with how Norway managed their wealth in natural resources. Through the Sovereign Wealth Fund, they prudently invest Norway's oil and gas revenues. Oil wealth helps fund their universal healthcare, free higher education, and generous social welfare. And Norway has one of the highest living standards and lowest income inequality globally. That's how a smart country does it. At this election, we have a choice. We can continue voting for the same parties that have failed to put people first, failed to plan for the future, and failed to give us a government we deserve. Or we can do something different. We can elect independents who will hold the government to account, fight for real investment in health, housing, public infrastructure, in people, and in the health of the planet, and represent our community and not party donors. We are living in a moment in history filled with challenges. After World War II, we never thought we would see the rise of authoritarianism in Western democracies, or return to a time when governments sought to limit our rights. And now, with the earth warming at unsustainable rate, we must ask, what kind of world are we leaving our children? We all say we want to leave the world a better place. But what kind of choices are we making today? Will doing the same thing lead to a different outcome? Or do we find the courage to do things differently? The major parties have had the chance. They have had the privilege of forming government in their own right, and they have taken it for granted. They've taken us for granted. The time has come for sensible, independent voices to sit at the table, to represent their communities, and to hold the government to account. This election, vote for a representative who will put you first. I'm Stella Yi, and I'm ready to stand for you. And I hope I have your support.